Good morning. This is Bonnie McFarland, and I apologize for our 1-minute delay there. We had some technical issues, but we're good now. Anyway, welcome to our second LCAP virtual meeting update. Before we go ahead, I'd just like to address some questions that we've gotten about some different and confusing messages you might be hearing regarding the status of the LCAP. As we shared at our last Zoom meeting with you, the decisions are now, it appears, resting with either at the legislative level or in the governor's office. As a result, this puts the decisions in more of a political realm than those generally taking place through CDE, and the discussions are taking place at that level. We don't have access to all the conversations going on in the governor's office, and obviously that's not within our realm to be addressing the political aspects of it. We can only share what we know and what is publicly available. When we do have any insights into what's going on, we share them with you, and we have to label them as such, that these are proposals that are out there. As soon as we have firm information, we'll definitely let you know, but those conversations continue and we have no firm information. Nothing's been put out about any changes. So as a result, we're moving forward with the expectation that you're having to plan right now for a number of changes, and that planning becomes even more important than it's ever been. That transparency is always important in a public agency, but especially in unsettling times. And that the needs of your low-income students, your English learners, and foster youths are becoming more apparent than ever. So that's the framework we're moving forward from, and we will keep you informed as best we can with any breaking information. I'm going to turn it over to Jeannie Keith now.
Thanks so much, Bonnie. Good morning, everyone. Today's meeting will address what we know, what you can consider doing at this time, and the importance of maintaining communication and transparency while addressing equity. Considering how you're coordinating planning and funding sources, and how you might be maintaining documentation and addressing the annual update at this time. And we will conclude with sharing your next steps and following up on your questions and answers. Next slide, please. As you have questions during the presentation, please type them into the chat, and we will respond to any questions that we can immediately. And other questions, can you go back to the chat slide? Thanks. And other questions we will follow up with our Q&A following the meeting. Next slide, please. So at this time, what we know. We know still that the statute governing the LCAP has not changed. And we know this includes the timelines for the annual submission. We know that the requirement for each LEA to have an approved LCAP is a mandate that can only be amended by the governor or the legislature. And as Bonnie mentioned, those decisions are in a political realm, and as we learn information about those, if there are changes, we will keep you informed. We do know that the CDE has reconvened the LCAP redesign advisory group, and they are soliciting input to specifically share the challenges that LEAs are facing and the steps that LEAs are taking to address the current unprecedented situation. So at this time, what can you do? Some things to consider. While the submission process and timeline for the LCAP may change, the LCFF commitment to equity, transparency, and accountability remain foundational to the legislation and the work that you're doing at this time. At this time, more important than ever, continuing a process to seek valuable input from stakeholders and keeping them informed is especially relevant to understand and address the needs of specific student groups. As you connect with and seek essential insight from stakeholders, including parents, students, and staff, as well as the Parent Advisory Committee and the English Learner Parent Advisory Committee, you will be well positioned to make decisions to address the immediate needs in your LEA. And this will support your LEA as you are reassessing and adjusting your work in real time to respond to the priority needs in your community. As LEAs focus on the needs in their community in response to the crisis, the decision-making considerations supporting the LCFF principles of accountability, transparency, and equity are foundational in determining how LEAs will reassess and adjust to their needs at this time. Now more than ever, staying connected with stakeholders to provide support to them and to seek their input to understand their needs will assist LEAs as they reassess and adjust their work to address basic needs and how to best continue learning at home. Maintaining these connections with students and families can inform LEAs with essential data about the impact of their work and make evident where they must prioritize adjustments necessary to respond to their most needy students and families. At this time, Evan is going to share some foundational principles of communication to consider during this time of crisis to support your community and keep the needs of your most needy students and families at the forefront of the decisions you're making. Next slide.
Good morning, everyone. This is Evan Bartelheim. Just a quick note, I will get the PowerPoint loaded. I think we've lost the ability to load a file in the Zoom chat box, so I'm going to have to post it to our website and then share it with you. So give me a few minutes after I speak and I'll get that up for you so you have the actual PowerPoint. So this is just, we wanted, in the absence of having some immediate direction in the LCAP, just some reminders of some general principles on which to operate. And these are taken from a variety of sources regarding crisis communication, including the CDC, and things that we should all be aware of as a public institution. These are relevant, but especially now. And as school boards and superintendents are communicating with stakeholders, I think these provide a valuable direction to maintain. So first of all, it's that need for accuracy and credibility. You know, we all know that honesty is fundamental to maintaining trust. So strive to do that at all costs. Also be transparent. You can't necessarily share everything at this time, but you should be tracking your actions, and you should assume that everything is eventually discoverable, which is not to say it's a threat, but we know that we live in a digital world, and so whatever actions are taken now, there can be an expectation that they will always be there as a matter of public record. Very importantly right now, and I know that everyone's doing this, I'm seeing it in my own children's school district, is to be authentic, you know, to provide a genuine, caring nature for your families. This is a period of profound crisis, and things that are, you know, not even secondary or tertiary are haunting families right now. So I think it's of critical importance that public institutions maintain their caring front. Also showing respect, and by respecting the interests and need to communicate with your stakeholders, their two-way communication, I think, is important to demonstrate how much we value their input, even if it can seem overwhelming, an overwhelming burden. Finally, it's important to communicate early and often. And this is a way, even if we do hear soon that the LCAP is being suspended for a certain amount of time, this is still an opportunity by communicating early and often what your plan is. And I know I've seen a lot of districts putting forward communication about what their plan is. You take control of the narrative, because you know, as Steve Zweibeck would say, information is oxygen, is like oxygen. So the more information you can get out, the more you control your own narrative and make sure that your stakeholders know you do have a plan moving forward. Next slide. So we wanted to share a uplifting video, we think, and it's a reminder of how important it is to ensure that the needs of our most vulnerable and marginalized students are being protected at this time. And there's also a message in this video that we think shares how you should best come to understand what the needs of these students are. So Adrian, if you could play the video.
I would like to become a pediatric physical therapist so I can help kids.
I want to apply to UCLA and major in psychology.
I want to be an entrepreneur and start my own clothing brand.
I'm hoping to go to four-year college and major in architecture. I want to be an animator.
I want to practice law. I want to help either in civil law or immigration law because those are the things that I see that are needed in my community to move forward.
Sorry about that. We had a little technical glitch here. Adrian, maybe just try clicking the link to take us out of the PowerPoint. It didn't seem to embed properly.
Okay. Should I go back to the PowerPoint?
I think if you go to the YouTube link will be probably better at this point.
Pediatric physical therapist so I can help kids.
I want to apply to UCLA and major in psychology.
I want to be an entrepreneur and start my own clothing brand.
I'm hoping to go to four-year college and major in architecture. I want to be an animator.
I want to practice law. I want to help either in civil law or immigration law because those are the things that I see that are needed in my.
We might just consider putting the link in the follow-up email.
Yeah, and we will do that. And I think it's definitely worth a watch. We'll keep moving forward here. And just to kind of cut to the chase, why bury the lead? The whole point is, I think the most important stakeholder group that we can be reaching out to right now are our students. And I hope that you are reaching out to the students to find out why it is that, or what their needs are right now. There's a fantastic article this morning in the New York Times, if you haven't seen it. It's based on, the problems we're having here, and some of our neediest students are just not attending school. And I'm sure you've seen that up close. So what is it? What can we do to reach out to those students to find out what those needs are? So I think now more than ever, we need to be able to reach out and have some two-way communication with them. And I'd love to hear if any of you are doing that. Please insert that in our chat, because we'd love to share best practices of what districts are doing at this time to maintain contact with their students, to be able to identify the needs that are arising that were maybe unforeseen in this current circumstances. Adrian, can you share your screen again to get us back in the PowerPoint?
Try to do this.
Okay. Another consideration is just, and this does tie into the LCAP, and that we're not making this specifically about the LCAP, but the underlying needs, conditions, and circumstances of our most vulnerable students have never been so apparent. I think that every conversation I've heard, it really strikes me that districts are now aware more than ever of the inequities, the barriers that exist for students to learn. And some of these obviously are driven by lack of access to technology, lack of reliable internet, lack of space for effective learning. But we would certainly like to know more. Next slide. So in the chat box or in an email, if you would please share with us what you have learned. And these are ways that we can share with our superintendent, and by way of doing that, share with the leaders at the state level. What are some of the basic needs that are not being met that you're made aware of that are unique to this extraordinary situation? Also, with the virtual classrooms, what kind of problems are you encountering, and what maybe some solutions you've come up with? And very importantly, I think, is the wellness. And I know this is a time where all the problems, the stress, the anxiety can be exacerbated. The existing problems that students struggle with regards to their wellness. So please do share these, because we'd like to keep an ongoing list of information to share with our superintendent as well as with the state. Next.
Hello, everyone. This is Rachel Garcia. And so just continuing the equity conversation that Evan started, and in thinking about the barriers and challenges that students face, these are just some questions to consider as you're thinking about ensuring equity for the various student groups. So how do you shift learning at home for all students while keeping the needs, conditions, and circumstances of low-income students, English learners, and foster youth at the forefront of your decision-making? Also, how do you use the data that's currently available to address those needs and performance gaps to achieve equity of outcomes for all student groups? Next slide. Also, as we think about distance learning and how to provide equitable access for low-income students, English learners, and foster youth, some important considerations also include the training and support available for teachers and outreach to students and parents. And so some additional questions to consider in this include what platforms do teachers have access to in order to connect with students? What resources and support do teachers need to provide instruction and to check for understanding virtually? And in thinking about outreach to parents and students, do students and parents have access to technology devices as well as internet? What resources are available to support students and parents without access? And what are the unique needs, conditions, and circumstances that low-income students, English learners, and foster youth face with distance learning? And how can the LEAs address these needs? And so Evan shared some of those examples, such as lack of technology. There may be spotty Wi-Fi access for students and parents. And we may have students that are taking care of siblings and so are having challenges with logging on online virtually. Next slide. It's also important to consider the emotional and physical needs of low-income students, English learners, and foster youth, and how LEAs can support those needs during this time of school closures. And so these are some key questions to consider in thinking about how to ensure equity for these student groups. Next slide. Here we wanted to share some resources with you. So these are some resources from the CDE for supporting English learners. The first is a parent newsletter with links to various resources within the newsletter, and it's provided in both English and Spanish. And so the links are provided there, but this is also on the CDE website. The second resource is a link to the CDE's Distance Learning Resources webpage. And so it includes a section for multilingual resources, as well as a section for English language development. And the CDE is also hosting a distance learning webinar this Thursday, focusing on the instructional strategies and English learner support. Next slide. We also wanted to share this resource for supporting foster youth. So LACOE has developed a resource guide to assist students in foster care and their support team during COVID-19. And so the resource guide provides links to resources in a variety of areas, such as mental health, self-care, special education, technology, college resources. And so the link to that resource guide is provided there on the slide. And next slide. So now I will turn it over to Bonnie.
All right, so given the huge changes you're facing right now, and probably for some time to come, there's a need for planning, and that's what you're doing right now, both short-term and long-term planning. And we wanted to give you some thoughts to consider regarding that. And first of all, if you've established a planning process through the LCAP in the past, that process can help you rethink how you're moving forward. Not only have the circumstances changed about how you're providing instructional programs, but state and federal officials are responding to your needs with additional funding and program flexibilities. And those need to be part of your thinking to support you moving forward. Most of these changes are for the current period and the coming school year. So when you see funding or flexibilities, most of those are going to be 1 year, either funding periods or flexibilities. So it's important to consider those changes when you're planning how to best make use and leverage the funds that you're getting for your needs. Next slide. The first funding that became available were state funds through SB 117. It's allocated to both districts and charter schools, and it was based on your 2019-20 first principal apportionment. So this was before the impact of the school closures. The amounts are already posted on the CDE website on the fiscal link. The first apportionment is actually 100% of the funds. So usually funds come in quarterly apportionment. These funds were put out in one apportionment. So the amount you'll see and the amount you've received is the full amount of the funding. The allocations vary. As you can see, they're from under $1,000 to over $7 million on some of our very large districts. The average there is just a little over $17 per ADA. So it's not a huge amount of money, but it is help, and it's out there now and ready for use. Next. The primary purpose of these funds is to really support your needs, your immediate needs relative to the COVID-19 issues. Maintaining nutrition services for students is primary. Also cleaning, disinfecting facilities, personal protective equipment is also included. There is language in the entitlement letter that indicates that funds may be used for materials to support distance learning. This isn't in the legislation, but apparently there will be cleanup legislation to allow for the use for that. Next. Okay, next, the recent congressional action, the CARES Act, is the, which is, whoops, where are we here? Okay, the CARES Act is the federal funding, and it is for K-12 institutions and institutions of higher education. So this is $3 billion put out nationally, and it is, there are two parts to it for K-12. It's allocated to states based on 60% of it's based on age 5 through 24, and you can see that's because it includes universities. The other part, 40%, is based on census poverty data. So you can see for most of these programs, there's an emphasis on some portion of it being focused on poverty data. It's primarily to support to support education agencies most impacted by the coronavirus. We don't know at this time how the governor's office will be allocating those funds, but it will be to high impact districts who've been most impacted by the virus. Okay, next. Okay. The second portion of the funds is the direct LEA funding. That's the Elementary and Secondary Emergency Relief Fund. These funds will have to be, they're going to districts based on your proportion of Title I Part A statewide funding. That's how it comes to the state. And then at least 90% of the funds have to be allocated to LEAs. These funds will be applied for by the state to the federal Office of Education, and then will be allocated to LEAs through the California Department of Education. Districts can anticipate receiving these funds the end of April or early May, and you should expect to receive an amount approximately 20% less than your 1920 Title I Part A allocation. They're recommending at the department that you look, and for planning purposes, you estimate probably a bit less than that, but essentially it should be about 20% under what your Title I funds are. This isn't going out as Title I money. It's going out on the Title I formula. But as you'll see, the uses are much broader than that. Okay. And the next several slides go through the use of funds, and you'll see there is a lot here. First of all, you can use them for any activity under most of the ESEA programs, including your formula grant programs, also Perkins, homeless assistance programs. Can also be used for coordination of preparedness and response efforts with other agencies to the coronavirus. You'll look at number 3, shows you what a broad use this has. It's providing principals and other school leaders with resources necessary to address their needs at schools. So any kind of support for schools. Another use is addressing the needs of various student groups, including low-income students with disability, homeless, and such. Again, developing procedures and systems to improve your preparedness efforts, training and professional development on sanitation and minimizing spread of infectious diseases. Continues on, supplies, sanitizing, cleaning facilities, also planning and coordinating for long-term closures, providing meals to eligible students, technology for online learning, and purchasing educational technology. Okay? And mental health services, again, planning for summer school programs and after-school programs, particularly for programs addressing the needs of low-income students, English learners, students with disabilities, homeless. And then you can see the last one, other activities that are necessary to make the operation and continuity of the LEA. So broad use of funds, and again, should be approximately 20% less than what you received in your Title I allocation. Expect those funds the end of this month or early next month. Okay. All right. In addition to the additional funding, the Secretary of Education announced earlier this week that, I guess that was yesterday, that they are taking advantage of some of the flexibilities that were provided in the CARES Act. And most of these are fiscally related flexibilities to support your work. First of all, we've had questions about this, and that is the Title I Part A 15% carryover. For 1920, LEAs will not be limited to that 15% carryover if the state requests the waiver. And the states have to request the waiver from the U.S. Department, and the department has indicated they'll have a one-day turnaround on those approvals. The period of availability for any unexpended 18-19 ESSA grant funds can be extended for 1 year. The requirement Title IV, there were a lot of flexibilities in Title IV, and these flexibilities taken together, you'll see the next 3, all address Title IV, and the restrictions essentially loosen the requirements for those expenditure pieces. Title IV required certain amounts of funds to be spent in each area. This loosens that up and allows more funds to be spent on technology support. And then finally, the definition of professional development to allow for training for distance learning is included. So those are some flexibilities to keep in mind that will address that should be taken into account as you're planning. Okay. So as you look at your current needs, putting together distance learning systems, how to support your teachers with professional development, your health and safety needs, access for groups, student groups that are facing barriers. Think about these funding sources, your LCF regular funds, how are you increasing and improving services with those funds, the SB 117 funds, which address some of your basic needs for immediate needs, the CARES funds, particularly the federal emergency relief that is a broad use. Sorry. And the Title IV flexibilities. Okay. All right. Just in time.
Hello, everyone. This is Adrienne. Hope you're doing well during this intense time. So looking at documentation, you know, at some point in time, you're going to need to share out the information that you're learning today, as well as the things that you have done, you know, earlier in the school year to either various people or for various reasons. So as you reflect on what are you learning during this current time, we do know, you know, your students and families are experiencing hardships. Some, their needs, conditions, and circumstances have worsened. And perhaps some of your families that didn't have these new you know, circumstances are now in those, you know, situations where they do have a greater need and condition and circumstance. So we ask you in terms of like, what is your strategy and what do you have in place to bring forth this information and to also document it? Do you have strategies in place to modify as you're gathering your new information during this time? And you'll find that the most vital information you're going to get are going to be people closest to the data, the people that are closest to the students. And so what's your system in gathering it? And somebody at your district, if it's not you, needs to be thinking ahead about how you're going to document all your information regarding engagement, program and services, and the finances. So with the engagement, what's your system to collect the communication that's taking place right now with your staff, with your parents, with your students, your virtual meetings, your surveys? And what about your program services and the implementation of these actions? You know, you want to make sure that you're gathering the information, as well as now with all of these additional funds, what's happening fiscally with your, you know, with the fiscal department and communication with the other departments, and what expenditures are taking place. Who will these people that are going to gather the information, and to consider what's your wheelhouse that you're working within, and perhaps there might be some, you know, reassessment or some revision to that system to include everything that's taking place currently right now, so that this does help you move forward as you report out, as you are planning your, not only just your LCAP, but just moving forward with meeting the needs of all your students and teachers. And so again, just something to consider moving forward. And now Amy will expand.
Yes, and I want to fully acknowledge the comments that I'm seeing in the chat as I talk about the annual update in the LCAP. We are fully aware of the challenges that you're all facing in terms of school closures and getting distance learning up and running. But this slide is really to say that we acknowledge that you had planned actions and budgeted expenditures for the 2019-2020 school year, which you likely implemented from July through March 20. But once COVID-19 came about, you know, you could have never predicted the great challenges that would bring to our school systems. And so this is really an awareness slide in understanding that, yes, we may or may not, we do not have full information yet about what the LCAP timeline or plan will look like this year. And as soon as we hear these updates from CDE, we'll be passing that down to you. But being aware, just as Adrian said, that changes at some point will be reflected in an annual update. And those changes may impact the actual planned actions that you had for 2019. Some actions maybe were no longer able to be implemented as planned. Some actions may have had to undergo a delivery and change of service, but may not have resulted in changes to the budget piece. Some LEAs may have made significant changes to both implementation and budget. There's a lot of unknown at this point, and we fully acknowledge that. But it will be important for reasons related to those stated by my colleagues earlier with the triangle of transparency, communication, equity, and accountability, that you have those systems in place that can help you track those changes and actions due to the current situation, so that when it does come time to document the actual actions and expenditures, you'll have the information you need moving forward. And I think also a lot of us have learned a lot about the needs, conditions, and circumstances that bring unique challenges to those students who are low income, the English learners and foster youth. So just keeping in mind how what we are learning through this situation might serve to inform our future planning of actions for these student groups. So we just want to kind of bring that context into play. Next slide, please. We are going to continue. We have one more planned LCAP Zoom meeting in the month of April, so that will be on April 21st. Of course, if we hear anything about the submission timelines or plan, that information will go out immediately to our LCAP contact list. We also, for those of you who are interested, running state and federal program Zoom meetings on the alternating Tuesday. So there is one coming up next Tuesday as well as on April 28th, and the links are there. So for all these continuing meetings, the Zoom links remain the same. So the link you use to get into the LCAP meeting today will be the same on April 21st. Next slide, please. Okay, and just to kind of restate, I think Evan put this in the chat as well. We do see your questions, and we're not maybe able to answer all those fully here directly in the chat, but we will be compiling all the Q&A and putting together a follow-up email so that will help you and support you in your work moving forward. And I think that, okay, this is our final slide, our contact information. And I know that some of you maybe joined us a little late. Yes, this Zoom is being recorded. Yes, we will have a follow-up, but I also want to bring Bonnie back up and maybe to close out our meeting. If you are not currently receiving our LCAP contact list information, you can email us here at LCAP or SFP, either one works, at laco.edu, and we can put you on the list. So
thanks, Amy, appreciate that. Just want to back up. Some of you may have joined us late, and we shared at the beginning, we wanted to respond to some questions and concerns about different messages that you might be hearing. And we shared, as we shared at the beginning, because this has moved into the political realm at the legislative and governor's level, it's not at the level where we really know what those discussions are. And we can only provide you information based on what is publicly available and provided to the field that is actual and factual information. Given that it's in the political realm, and we said we will label anything as conjecture that is conjecture, but we can, that one conjecture can be that there are probably discussions not about the LCAP in terms of the content and the format and checking the boxes. I think probably the conversations, as was mentioned earlier, the advisory committee is meeting. The advisory committee includes districts, counties, and also advocacy groups. And so the questions, I'm sure, are about how do we move forward in a reasonable way so districts can do business that they need to do, but also ensure that the fundamental principles of transparency and equity are not ignored. And we anticipate there will at some time be some accountability for whatever happened during this time. And if you are acting under those principles that Evan talked about, communicating with your public, providing support for your most at-risk students, you will weather this storm. And everyone is hearing the need for a paper and pencil LCAP is problematic for people at this time. And the specifics of it, I think, are not the issue. And that's why, if we sound like a broken record, we're talking about sticking to those principles in your actions, documenting what you're doing, and keeping track of it and how you're supporting. You are doing the right things, and you just need to make sure that when asked about it at some time, and that always will come up sometime, we'll be back to normal someday. When normal comes, that you can show that you did the right thing and you followed the intent and purpose of the law. So my sense is we don't know. Nothing now has changed. The fact that it's taking so long gives us to think that there are those discussions about how do we maintain that balance at this time. Let's see, did I have any other? I can answer only one question for sure that was in the chat. Yes, that was my dog. I apologize. Okay. But other than that, we will continue, as I say, to keep you informed. We will provide questions to all, our answers to all your questions that you shared with us in the chat, as I hope that was helpful last time, and we'll do that again and continue to seek answers. I think we want to we put out questions, and I think the only questions that we're getting, we didn't get any back. So I'm guessing the questions are when and what is going to be required. And I think those are going to be, those are definitely being heard. And I know our superintendent is advocating for you and your needs out there. So we'll look forward to seeing you in a couple of weeks, but if something happens before that, we will definitely get something out to you immediately. And you have the contacts for all of your LCAP contacts. Contact us anytime. We're here and here to support you. Thanks so much.